Good evening and welcome to the Brattleboro Selectboard meeting of Thursday. It says Thursday on the agenda. That's first correction. Tuesday, April 2nd, 2024. We convened at 5:15 p.m. for an executive session, and at that time asked the town manager whether the meeting was properly warned. But John, could you reconfirm the meeting was?
Yes, it was properly warned for April 2nd.
Thank you so much. Okay, so first order of business today is to approve the minutes. We have minutes from March 21st and March 26th, 2024. Is there any discussion about the minutes, first of all?
No.
Seeing none, I'll accept a motion.
I'll motion that we accept those minutes.
Okay, Peter has motioned to accept the minutes from March 21st and March 26th, 2024. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And raise their hands beautifully.
Well,
Thank you.
There, so.
Oh, you weren't there?
Yeah, you should
Okay,
abstain.
so we're going to approve that 4-0. All opposed, say nay, just in case. Okay, so I guess we have one abstention. Next up is Chair's remarks. Wow, that got there quickly. Let's see. So this is my first meeting chairing the Brattleboro Select Board. I'm entering my, what is this, sixth year on the board. And it will be my last year on the board. I won't be seeking re-election at the end of this term. That is no, I don't know, maybe not, it's not big news to myself. Maybe it's moderate-sized news for some people. But I'm really excited to work with this board over the next year. I think we're going to work well together. And during my time as chair, I would just kind of ask you all to kind of be patient with me. I would ask all of us to be generous with one another and kind. And during my time as chair, I would like to make sure that we are hearing from the public as much as possible. So my tendency is going to want to hear whatever presentation we have clarifying questions from the board, then go to the public for clarifying questions, then come back to the board for some discussion, maybe hear a little bit more from the public, and then move it forward. Another thing that I want to do during my time as chair in working with Liz and with John is to create reasonable agendas that almost never plan to go past 9:30 p.m. And that might mean that we meet a couple more times than we usually do for special meetings. And I think that will be good for the public, and I think it will be good for the board and staff that participate in those meetings. And then finally, I would ask for accountability. In the organizational meeting, I forgot to ask for nay votes, and nobody mentioned it to me. I felt terrible about it for a week. So if I make a mistake, which I undoubtedly will, just let me know, and I will try to take it in my stride. So that is it for Chair's remarks, and I'll move on to Manager's comments.
Thank you, Daniel. A couple things. Over the weekend, the Brattleboro police officers made another significant drug bust in town. So I want to give a shout out to them for continuing to combat the influx of drugs being transported into our community. Very grateful for this work. I wanted to give you all an update on the Transportation Center project. The temporary closure of the top deck is complete. The elevator is locked out at the top floor. Lower level enclosures are fabricated and will be installed over the next few days. The phone line and associated signs are installed. Additional lighting has been ordered. The architect is designing the anchoring for the perimeter fence, and fencing should be ordered later this week. And I'm really grateful to Dan Tyler and Pete Lynch and their teams for pulling this together so quickly. Finally, the Brattleboro Recreation and Parks Department is taking registration for summer camps and programs. You can register in person at the Rec and Parks office at 207 Main Street or online at brattleboro.gov. That's it.
Great. Thank you, John.
Yep.
Next on our agenda, Select Board comments and committee reports. Would anybody like to make a comment or provide a committee report? Elizabeth?
Thank you. During representative town meeting, a member said to me that they heeded my words about not being seen as pedestrians in the dark and bought a high visibility coat. And I was very gratified because I didn't think anybody paid any attention. But it is something, not only do we talk about at select board meetings, but under traffic safety. And it was also brought up at representative town meeting, the pedestrian fatalities. And so we all just need to be mindful of that we're sharing the roads, and we all need to be careful to be seen. And I, again, urge people to pay attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter?
Yeah, I just wanted to also echo what John said, and props to our police department for that sizable bust, which was really nice to know that stuff's not on the street. I park and utilize the downtown parking facility almost every single day, and have watched how rapidly the progress has been going with on the third floor of the blocking out of those windows, the closure of the top. So I'm really, my hat's off to DPW for that hard work and really attacking that head on.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none. So the next item on our agenda is public participation. This is where members of the public can speak on matters that are not on tonight's agenda. And so they can also express their desire to pull an item from the consent agenda if they so wish. And so I will invite members of the public in the room to raise their hand and be recognized. Mr. Agave. If you could just state your name.
Spoon Agave. I'm here to increase the focus on the old Sportsman's Place. It's been sitting there empty for 12 years. I don't know. Who knows? We've lost track how long it's been empty. It's been rotting away. It's a fire waiting to happen. I had a long talk with not a long talk, but a serious talk with the fire chief about a year ago, and I heard some of the problems. I had a decent talk with the zoning administrator just recently, so I'm quite aware of all the problems. But I'm also aware, after a half a lifetime around municipal governments and whatever, that really the problem now is that it is just not on anybody's agenda. And it's not really being pushed. You know, somebody talks to somebody and they say, okay, we'll look into this or do that. And then 3 more months pass, 6 more months pass, and there's another conversation, and 6 more months pass, et cetera, et cetera. And interestingly and sort of ironically, part of the problem is where it's located on that steep bank, which greatly increases the cost of demolition because you have to protect the bank. In the meantime, not doing anything, the bank is filled with trash. And I mean a dumpster, too, load of it, washing down into the creek, which is the whole reason that they need to protect the bank. So it's a real problem. It sits in the middle of town. It is old, dry wood. It'll be, if a fire starts, it'll be fully engaged in 5 minutes. And fortunately, there are no other structures abutting it. So, but nevertheless, it's a problem. That's the first half. Related to that, years ago, we had an organization known as the Brattleboro Area Affordable Housing Committee or something like that. Byron Stuckey, I think, was the originator there. And they did quite a lot of work and got some very good things done as far as opening up people, enabling people to put apartments in houses and stuff like that. Some of the work they did included surveying the town for properties that could become affordable housing, used for affordable housing. And, what they did, and by, I think, 97, it was that work was completed, they had inventoried the whole town. Well, the Old Sportsman's is a good place for that. Further up the road, you find 2 fairly large properties, not large structures, but large land properties. The old Jad's Restaurant and Burton's Car Wash have been empty for years now, rotting away. And that is a magnificent place for what could be a very large affordable housing site. If you go up Canal even further, the old printing place, name skips my mind, but that's been empty for several years. And if you go behind that, there's quite an impressive large piece of land. There's probably, I mean, it is a split up into different property owners. That could be potentially affordable housing. It's certainly a prime location for housing on a main road near shopping stores and everything else. So I urge, I just want to go public here, urging the town to get on the Sportsman and get something done. You know, start to put some limits on and get real negotiations going, and to start inventorying or re-inventorying properties. There's quite a bit around for potential affordable housing.
Great. Thanks,
Thank you.
Boone. And I'm going to be generous because I didn't ask anybody to stick to a time limit, so no time limit required for you. But if in future we could stick to maybe a 3-minute time limit, and we'll see how that goes. Thank you, Spoon. I think we have somebody on Zoom, Carol.
Hi there. I'm
Hi,
Carol McInnes, and I'm from Brattleboro. Thank you and congratulations to all those that were reelected or just elected to the select board. I just want to piggyback on what Spoon Agabi mentioned. I brought that up about 6 months ago or so about the Sportsman's Lounge. I totally agree. It's not doing any good for our environment, and it is definitely a hazard. The other thing I wanted to mention is that BAR, Brattleboro Area Affordable Housing, is still operating. It's a wonderful organization. So just wanted. And then, of course, Burton's Car Wash and Jazz is owned by Connie Burton, and she has plans of putting another car wash in there. So I don't think that's an option, but great ideas. Thank you. That's it for me.
Thanks, Carol. And any other members of the public who wish to speak on something not on the agenda, raise their hand. Or if they're on Zoom, they could raise their Zoom hand. Okay. Seeing none, we will move on to the consent agenda. John, could you give us a summary of the items on consent this evening?
Absolutely. There are 9 items on consent tonight, Daniel. If you approve this agenda, you will be authorizing a contract in the amount of $60,000 with SLR Consulting to develop conceptual plans for intersection improvements on Western Ave at William Street and up to Guilford Street. You will be approving annual entertainment licenses for the Brattleboro Winter Farmers Market at 60 Austin Drive and one for the Brattleboro Museum and Arts Center at 10 Vernon Street. You will be approving a limited event permit for the Brattleboro Brewers Festival. You will be accepting and appropriating a $20,000 grant from the Vermont Department of Libraries for transition of the library's Wi-Fi network. You will be approving a parade permit for the Green Street School's annual Tulip Trot. You will be authorizing the Department of Public Works to apply for 2 VTrans grants, one for up to $200,000 for culvert replacement work on Ackley Road, and one for up to $200,000 for resurfacing Greenleaf and Heinsberg roads. And finally, you will be approving a memorandum of understanding with Edible Brattleboro for use of a town-owned property at 805 Western Ave in West Brattleboro to create a food forest and pollinator garden.
Thanks, John. Do any select board members wish to pull an item from the consent agenda this evening for consideration at the end of the meeting? Franz?
I might. I don't know yet. What I'd like to do is discuss the consent agenda.
I don't know if we can. That's kind of the whole purpose.
Well, yeah, I understand. I don't know
Why don't you say
what
what
the
you wanna
limits
say?
are in terms of
Well, it's a good job we have the town attorney here. Why don't you say what you want to say, and then we'll see.
Okay, my concern in general on the consent agenda is that it seems to me that there are maybe two criteria that come to mind for something to be on consent. One is that it's something that's easy to agree to, that we don't really need to go into the details of. But it's not just that it's easy to agree to, it's also that there's no need for additional explanation or additional information presented to the public as well, that the public might benefit from or otherwise want to hear. So if there's a way to do it on consent and give additional information when needed, then that's okay. I don't feel a need to pull it from the consent agenda. But if that's a limitation and it can't be on consent, and still give additional information to the public, then I would want to pull one of these items off consent.
Would you like to tell us which item you'd like to pull?
Yes, it's the first item relating to the study at Western Avenue and Guilford Street.
Okay. So I propose we do the following. We pull that item, and perhaps at a future meeting, we can discuss the consent agenda policy.
Actually, the consent agenda policy is warned tonight under item 8C. 3, that's where you address, in your rules of conduct, you address the consent agenda.
Okay.
The purpose of it is to keep the meetings moving along quickly and not talking about things that, take a lot of time that, you probably are in agreement on. Or so.
Great. Okay.
And one thing to add there is that a lot of information about each of those items is included in your backup materials, thorough explanation of each one.
You still wish to pull that item?
Yes, I do.
Okay, very good. So we will pull item A from the consent agenda, which is the Western Avenue at Guilford Street and Williams Street contract authorization for consideration after item 8C, Selectboard housekeeping. Okay, so I would take a motion. John?
And you got to take that one off.
Yes. Yeah. Elizabeth?
I move to approve the consent agenda as amended by Dr. Reichman.
Very good. Elizabeth has moved to approve the consent agenda as amended. All those in favor say aye and raise your hand. Aye. 5-0. So that consent agenda is passed as amended, and we'll discuss the Western Ave, Guilford Street, Williams thing later on. Next up is new business. And our first item of new business is VTrans will be here to present on Zoom, I hope. Hi, Gary. They're going to present about Bridge 54, which is a project on Western Avenue at Melrose Street. Gary, thank you for joining us. And I'm going to just pass it right over to you. We've got about 40 minutes for this item. So.
Excellent. All right. Thanks, Dan. I have Green International here with me tonight. Dennis. Dennis, you can unmute. We're going to present the preliminary plans of the Brattleboro, Vermont 9 Melrose Street Bridge Replacement Project tonight. Dennis, can you share your screen?
Yes. It appears that I need permission to share the screen. Is that an option for me to do that so I can point to the different items that I'll be presenting on?
It's shared.
So, hi, Dennis. This is Patrick. I actually have the presentation on the screen. So if it's all right with you, I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to coordinate this earlier. If it's all right with you, just let me know next slide and I'll hit next slide.
Is that sufficient?
Yeah, I can make anything work. If I had access, I could point out to certain things on the screen, which might be helpful when questions come up, but I'm perfectly okay with using the method that you've set up.
Let's go as we are.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
I'll proceed. So, as Gary introduced, my name is Dennis Verdiev. I am a project manager for Green International, and we are working for the state of Vermont for this project. And we've been retained by VTrans to provide design plans to replace the Bridge 54 on Vermont Route 9. And that's what I'll be talking about today. If you could do next slide, please. So as you can see here, the agenda for today's meeting is to talk about the project development process and where we currently stand with that. We will talk about the project location, the existing conditions, preliminary plans, traffic, project schedule and estimate of costs, and ultimately get to a couple feedback questions for the town, and also have an opportunity for anyone to ask us questions as well. All right, so as you can see here on the screen, the project development of the project, we are essentially in the project design phase. Prior to the project design phase, there is a project funding phase and a project definition phase, both of which have been completed. So we've identified all the constraints, the impacts, the any kind of natural resources. We've also had public participation and ultimately have proceeded with the design plans themselves. We've submitted conceptual plans and have completed that phase, and also the preliminary design plans as well. As you can see on the screen, the next steps are currently the property owner contact and the quantifying areas of impact and the environmental permits. So just as recently as last week, we've met with the impacted abutters out on site and have had some great interactions and conversations with them. We've been able to, receive a lot of their feedback and answer their questions on site. And we now, after this presentation, we will be closing the loop on those interactions by sending out minutes from those property owner visits, and then moving into the environmental permits and the right-of-way process, which is the next big phase of the design of this project. I'll talk about the specifics about dates and future aspects of the design on a later slide. Next slide. As you can see here, I know most of you are probably very familiar with this area, as I know some of you just mentioned Western Ave and the study that's happening there. This project is located along that road, Vermont Route 9. And the bridge itself is located over the Whetstone Brook. You can see it's really close to the intersection of Western and Melrose Street, which is where this bridge is located. The existing bridge, it looks like there's a photo that may not be showing up, but that's okay. Looks like it was constructed in 1914, and there were no record plans of the bridge itself. The bridge is on a state numbered route, and the roadway classification is a principal arterial. The bridge type is a reinforced concrete arch with a 60-foot span and a 31-foot deck for the width of the bridge. The photo is just a photo looking west along the approach roadway. The bridge has been inspected throughout the years. The most recent inspection was performed in June of 2023, and the inspections follow the National Bridge Inspection Standards for ratings. So a 9 is an excellent, and a 0 is a failed condition, which would require closure of a bridge. The culvert, or the bridge in this case, is rated at a 6, which is considered satisfactory. The channel and the channel protection around the bridge is also rated a 6 and satisfactory. Next slide, please. The roadway surface in this area is an asphalt roadway, paved roadway. It does have some significant cracking and some wear and tear showing up in the pavement surface. There's some potholes and things like that throughout the area. The sidewalk on the north side of the bridge is in fair to poor condition. There are locations where it's cracking and has some significant grading concerns with the sidewalk, along with some grass and such growing through it. The crosswalk on the north side of the bridge, you can see here on the screen on the image on the right, is across Melrose Street. Next slide, please. The existing arch and bridge, along with its abutments, you can see here, there's some photos of the bridge looking from the brook out to it. You can see the abutments of the two photos below. What you see, that pipe that you see in the image, that's the water line that crosses under the bridge. You can see this bridge was rated at a 6. It has minor wearing along the lower portions of both abutments. It has minor cracking with saturation and leaking along certain portions of the abutments, and small areas of spalling, which is concrete falling off of the abutments in the lower portion of the western abutment 1. Next slide. The channel, which also is reviewed and rated, was also rated a 6. The bank of the channel is beginning to slump and move and shift. The river control devices and the material that's placed on the river bank to keep the river at its current location. There is some minor damage from recent flooding there. There is some stream bed movement as well that was observed on site. Minor debris that has blocked the channel. The channel is primarily gravel with small stone, and it does frequently overflow during larger storm events. Next slide. So as I go through the preliminary design, I will talk about the general layout of the proposed bridge, the design characteristics that were followed, typical sections, and the rest of this list here in the upcoming slides. Next slide. The site layout. So the proposed bridge, it will have a much wider bridge. It's 20 feet wider than the existing 30-foot bridge. It will be 51 feet out to out. It will have 11-foot travel lanes in both directions, 1 in each direction, 8-foot shoulders, 5.5-foot sidewalks on both sides of the bridge, and a 1-foot bridge railing on both ends of the bridge. The expanded hydraulic opening is done to eliminate some of the flooding issues that are occurring here today, and will help improve the capacity of the bridge for modern vehicles and other users such as pedestrians and bicyclists in this area. The design characteristics, I'll move through this fairly quickly. I can always go back to any of these things if there's any questions, but the single span bridge has a skew to it because of the river as it comes across the roadway. There will be a concrete T-beams that will be set on new abutments on both sides of the bridge. And the bridge will look much more similar to what you typically see when you see more of the standard bridges around the state. It'll have a rectangular opening with beams across the top, which will create additional capacity, and we'll be placing stone along the abutments to help protect the new abutments from scour. The water line that's there today will still be carried under the bridge, and you'll see that in the typical sections that are coming up. Next slide, please. As you can see, these two typical sections, the one at the top represents the cross-sectional view of the roadway. So that's if you took a slice across the roadway, that's essentially what you would see in front of you. All of those things that I just described, the 11-foot travel lanes, the 8-foot shoulders, the 5-foot sidewalks, those are all shown. We'd be doing a full depth roadway reconstruction on the bridge approaches. So as you approach the bridge, there would be full depth reconstruction of the roadway. And you can see the typical below, the one that's the one below the first one. That is a typical cut section across the bridge itself. So you can see those abutments that'll be installed. The beams that'll be installed across the bridge, and the water line you can see will be set in one of the bays on the left side of the bridge. They'll be installed underneath the deck. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, 5.5. There'll be curbing along with sidewalks on both sides, integral abutments, guardrails on all four corners to the approaches to the bridge. New retaining walls will be constructed on all four corners of the bridge, and the deck will be a pre-stressed concrete deck with T-beams. You can see here there's an image of the sidewalk and what it would typically look like for this kind of application. So you'd see there's a sidewalk, and then there's the rail and the end of the bridge and the river beyond it. This is what you would have on both sides of the bridge with that type of railing installed as well. I mentioned earlier that there's utilities that are in the area that will be impacted by this project. As I mentioned, there's already an existing 16-inch water line that will be replaced as part of this project within the limits of the work. And there's also sewer lines that run along the highway here, but also along the Whetstone Brook, and those will be partially impacted as well. There is consolidated communication underground telephone lines within the limits of the project, and then there's also overhead or aerial utilities, Comcast, Green Mountain Power, and First Light. This plan shows a lot of those utilities, and they're color-coded. So you can see here there are a variety of things, and I'll just point and highlight a couple in particular. There's an existing telephone duct bank that's owned by Consolidated that runs along the roadway and goes under the brook. There are also, that's shown in 2 orange lines on the plans. There's a variety of water lines that are all located in this area. You can see that they cross here back and forth, and a lot of those water lines will have to be replaced as part of this project, and they are incorporated into the design and the layout that you see here on the screen. There's also a drainage component to this project as well. You can see that there is a proposed drainage layout with new catch basins, new manholes, new pipes, and new outfalls to make sure that, under our final conditions, that there's proper drainage for the roadway. I won't read all of this, but I'll just highlight the fact that there is subsurface utility engineering work that will be performed. Some of it has already been performed. What they'll do is they'll go out and they'll do some test bits to confirm the exact location of all of the utilities underground, their exact location and depth. And that is done in order for us to make sure that we have all of that incorporated properly into our design so that those issues are resolved during the design phase rather than the construction phase of the project. So some of those utility relocations will be planned in advance. Most of them, all of them will be planned in advance and incorporated into the design plans. There will be a temporary bridge, and I'll talk about that just shortly because it's here on the screen, but I'll point out the layout of it in a second. In order for us to demo and take down the existing bridge, we need to build a new temporary bridge just to the south of the existing bridge location. And that new temporary bridge will be similar to what you see on the screen. This is just one particular manufacturer named Acro. But essentially, these are prefabricated bridges that come in 10-foot sections that can be set up and broken down fairly quickly, and will allow traffic to continue on this highway during the demolition and the construction of the new bridge just to the south. You can see there's a 3D version of the image on the right, and then a cross-sectional view on the left. One thing I'd like to highlight is the sidewalk will also be part of this temporary bridge, and we will continue to provide pedestrian access. Yeah, right there. Perfect. Thank you for highlighting that. There'll be an existing 5-foot sidewalk, as as part of the temporary bridge. So pedestrians will continue to be able to cross here during construction. This is the layout of the temporary roadway and bridge. You can see in the middle of the screen, there is a hatched area. That hatched area is the existing bridge and the immediate surrounding area of it. So that is where the heaviest construction will be occurring, is in that hatched area. The roadways will be fully closed on all approaches to that hatched area, including Melrose Street. And a driveway access will be maintained to the properties that abut the project. So there will be driveway access that's maintained, but the roadway itself will be closed. The roadway will be detoured onto a temporary road that is to the south of the existing bridge, onto a temporary bridge that I showed in the previous slide. You can see here, there's obviously going to be some curvature that has to occur in the interim, for those in order to get the roadway into place and keep it as tight as possible to the existing roadway while we do that. We also do need to create some space for constructability and staging so that the contractor can build the new bridge on site. Next slide, please. The proposed bridge, there's some layout information here. It will have two travel lanes. There'll be 1 foot shoulders and a temporary 5 foot sidewalk that'll be provided in the temporary condition. We'll have guardrails on both sides of the approaches, and the bridge itself will have guardrails built into it. One thing I'd like to also highlight is that the pedestrians are separated from the bridge by the vertical supports of the bridge itself. So they'll be physically separated from the vehicles. Okay, next slide. Traffic will be maintained during construction. We expect that once the new bridge is built, or temporary bridge is built offline, the main line will be closed and traffic would be diverted onto the detour. And so we only expect, short-term closures and detours in the area, simply just to make those transitions, get vehicles, from traveling on the temporary road to the permanent condition and back. All those detours will be signed. They'll be short-term, and they will have flaggers and police associated with them. But the detour itself is planned to be in place from April 1st to November 15th. So we don't expect that during the winter, vehicles will have to drive on the temporary detour. They will be back on the main line. And so the contract will be written, and the contractor will be required to open the road back up on the main line prior to the start of the winter. The project is scheduled for advertisement in May of 26. It's expected that the temporary roadway and bridge construction would start in 2026 in September, as you can see here. And then traffic would be transitioned onto the temporary detour in the spring of 27. And that's when the existing bridge would be demolished and the new bridge would be constructed. The contractor would have the spring through the fall of 27 to do that work, after which they would divert all the vehicles back onto the newly constructed bridge and close the detour down for the winter season. The following spring, they would finish removing all of the temporary grading and temporary disturbance, and they would also do all of the seeding and the plantings and vegetation reestablishment would happen in the spring and summer of 2028. This is just another view of the schedule. I'll highlight that our next design phase is final plans, which would be in December of this year. So at the end of this year, then we would move into contract plans, advertisement, and construction, as I mentioned in the previous slide. Now, project costs. This project was initially scoped in 2021. We were brought on board to initiate the conceptual and the preliminary design, and preliminary design is the final design phase that we've reached so far. That's in 2024, as you can see in that second column. So the scoping was done in 21, the preliminary design in 2024, and there has been some significant cost increases in the cost of this work and the cost of the bridge. The current understanding is that the town share is 10% of the project, which, using the latest and greatest construction and project costs, that would be $1.56 million. The scoping estimate was developed prior to the selection of consultants, so that was done, prior to developing the engineering costs associated with doing this design. It also, you can see here that the right-of-way costs remain unchanged. That we've continued to minimize the right-of-way impacts, and we've been able to reduce those and keep them to a minimum. The engineering and the contingency costs were not included in the original scoping cost, but have since been added to this total, and you can see here on the screen. I think, without just going through all the numbers, I'll just go to the next slide, and we can always come back to this if people have questions. Some of the items that were not included in the conceptual design or the scoping portion of the project were the proposed water line impacts, the proposed sewer line impacts, the additional signage and striping and the landscape design that's needed. Retaining walls were added to the project after scoping. They were done after coordination with the abutters. It was determined that the impacts that just cutting the slope back onto the property would be too great, and that retaining walls were needed in order to keep the limits of the project tighter to the roadway. So those were done. Those were added to the design. We've also had, as I'm sure most folks have noticed and are aware of, there's been significant increase in costs as a whole, utility costs, costs associated with mobilizing the project, uniformed police officers, flaggers, things like solid rock excavation, steel. These are all items that have had significant increases over the last 3 to 4 years and have contributed to the significant cost of the project. As I mentioned, the major impacts were from the unit prices, inflation, temporary bridge being a longer bridge than originally planned, retaining walls, and a big cut on the temporary detour that is needed in order to facilitate the flood storage of the brook during construction. This is another table comparing the different construction cost items. So the bridge cost alone, the bridge itself has gone up about $2 million or $2.3 million. The demolition of the existing structure has gone up about $200,000, and so on. You can see that temporary control of traffic and traffic maintenance is also an item that has had significant increase, along with utilities and utility impacts. Next slide, please. So as I wrap this up, appreciate everyone's patience. We have a couple primary things that we'd like to take away from this presentation and, from this conversation with the town. There's been discussion in the past about Melrose Street and whether or not there is any desire to convert Melrose Street into a one-way under final conditions. This is something that has been pointed out to us during the design phase, but we would like to get an official response from the town on whether or not there'll be any pursuit of that. The work we're doing does impact Melrose Street and has significant impacts to Melrose Street. So if there was a desire to reduce the width and convert it to a one-way, this would be an opportune time for that because we could incorporate that into the project without significant additional cost. And that would also include the signage and striping necessary for that. We also are looking to get confirmation on the finance and maintenance agreement. And, Gary, the project manager for VTrans, can talk more about that as we get into the questions portion of it. But that's another aspect of this that needs to be discussed and finalized. And then the approval of the final plans in order to advance the approval of the plans in order to advance the final design. The property owner minutes will be sent out, as I mentioned earlier, and will be distributed to the town. If there is any feedback on those minutes or questions or concerns, we'd be happy to discuss those as well once the town has those. We did meet with the property owners and discuss general concerns. A lot of their concerns were primarily focused on naturally the impacts to their parcels and their properties. We talked those through, and I think we were able to show and demonstrate that we've minimized those wherever possible. Another concern that came up was driveway access during construction. And we were able to show that we are maintaining driveway access during construction, even during the roadway closure. They will always have access to their property and to be able to get in and out. There might be temporary moments of just, of closure directly in front of a driveway, but we will have police details, flaggers on site, and also a full-time resident engineer from VTrans that'll be there to coordinate access and things like that. And I think that's it. So we can, step into the questions section of this. And, Gary, I don't know if you wanted to add anything else to what I said.
I think you covered it pretty well, Dennis. We can move right into questions.
Great. Thank you, Dennis. Appreciate the presentation. So we'll take some clarifying questions from the board, first of all, and then open it up to the public. Peter, I think, raised his
Point
hand.
of order.
Yes.
Do we want to have a motion before we begin the discussion or later?
I'm fine with some clarifying questions right now.
Okay.
So you had mentioned that the current bridge, the situation in it is at a classification of 6, which is satisfactory. What I'm curious about is what is a classification of 5 and how close is this bridge to that? That's
Gary,
question number 1.
Gary, do you mind chiming in on that?
Absolutely. I don't have probably a very clear answer for the board on that. Generally, when you go from a 6 to a 5, it's going from a satisfactory to a poor condition. Oftentimes, when you move into a poor condition, then you get usually the bridge inspection will reach out with notification of that rating since it's a town-owned asset, and that if there's any immediate action that's required as part of that new rating. Generally, it's like critical maintenance reports that are submitted to towns when bridges or infrastructure is in need of repair.
And Gary, it's also possible, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there would be some restrictions on capacity potentially and loadings on the bridge.
Depending on what the condition and where they determine that condition being poor. It's all dependent.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Other questions from the board? Elizabeth, as your hand raised.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. My questions are for Gary. Gary, so this is just, an ordinary Tuesday night, but you're asking us for another $1 million. And I have a really hard time with that. First of all, you don't discuss whether there was any value engineering done to bring those costs down. Second of all, we got an email the other day from a motorist who was driving from Toronto through Albany to his home in New Hampshire and brought home to us, as we had already brought up, that this road is the artery for this interstate transportation. But because it's on town property, we're required to have a 10% match and not a 5. And we struggled with that when this project began, and I would say we're struggling with it now with this extra $1 million that you're asking us, because it was quite difficult for us as a town of 12,000 inhabitants to come up with the $500,000 that you asked us for a couple years ago. So I request that VTrans really dig deep and work harder to A, lower the price, and B, go back to your regulations and see how we can qualify for a 5% match, because, you know, since that time there's been federal infrastructure money that the state has received, and I don't see why that can't be used for such an important road as this. And I also just think that the scale of this project is such that it's too much to ask of a town to have a 10% match. And I'm not one to blithely accept another $1 million in expenses for this project that, frankly, the state of Vermont needs more than we do.
Thank you. Other questions from the board? I think Franz and then Richard.
Yes. Thank you, Daniel. My issues are, I think, similar to some of what Liz was just expressing. I think the price increase here is just astronomical. I mean, the rate of inflation in consumer price index hit about 8% per year, year before last, and that was considered extreme. And we're seeing a growth in the price of this project of over 200% or more. So, you know, I don't see where that lines up with inflation. I guess there were some significant things that were left out of the original plans that are now being included. You know, and I think it looks like a great project, but this just may be too much bridge for us. And a related question I have is, where are we in this process now? Has there been a preliminary plan already approved? Or are we still talking about approving the preliminary plan? And that's important because of the paragraphs relating to cancellation or default by the municipality, which I feel we're perhaps getting close to.
Do you need an answer to that question right now?
If someone can tell me where we are, whether this is still part of the preliminary planning or have we gone past that and we're now in the post-preliminary planning, because that will perhaps determine some of what our actions are.
Great. Thanks, Franz. Gary or Dennis, I'm not sure if you're able to answer that question just now.
So that preliminary planning and cancellation of the project is outlined in the finance and maintenance agreement that we would be looking for signature on if we were to proceed past preliminary plans. So right now we finished the preliminary planning stage or preliminary plan stage and looking to proceed to final design.
But has the preliminary plan, that's really the cut point. I'm not familiar with all the legal language here, but it seems like if we haven't approved a preliminary plan as yet, then one set of circumstances applies. If we have approved it, then it's a slightly different set of circumstances.
So we did get concurrence from the town at the for management approval of scope for the development of the preliminary plans that we presented to you tonight with this alternative, and I can send that signed memo back with that concurrence for development of these plans that we have, and I would have to look into if the project was to be canceled, I would have to look into what the guidelines are if that was pursued. I would. I'd like to respond to Liz's comments regarding cost of the project a little bit, and a little bit additional context to the increase in price. So during the scoping process, it's, we don't get into design of the project during the scoping process. It's a very high level alternative analysis of the project, and the estimates that are taken are based largely on square foot unit prices of roadway from other relative projects or other similar type projects. That's how our scoping team typically puts estimates together. There are a lot of nuances with this project that required additional attention. That included, the temporary roadway and temporary bridge. Temporary works are very expensive, generally speaking. We were required by permitting, to design a temporary roadway to accommodate the flood hazard and corridor permit requirements, since it's required to be in place for longer than 6 months, to assure FEMA guidelines are, maintained for insurance, flood insurance for at-risk properties in the area. So we are not allowed to have any sort of flood raise conditions as a result of this project. So that causes the approaches to be lengthened. We had additional, more water line and drainage work that was anticipated as part of the project. We had, during a select board meeting, I believe it was in November of, I'm losing track of years now, sorry, 21, when the management before the management approval of scope was signed off from the town, we met on site with the property owners, with the select board, and discussed impacts of the property owners and the Smiths and the Kratz, and several of the property owners showed up or attended that meeting, expressed their concerns, and we left that meeting with the direction, or what we thought was the direction, to include retaining walls on each corner of the bridge. That retaining walls are significantly long on the corners of the bridge to minimize impacts to the property owners, which does significantly increase the project cost. We can reduce the project retaining walls. There are ways to minimize the project. However, we would be impacting the property owners all that much more. And I believe I saw the Smiths in the audience tonight, so they can reply to that if they wish. But there, as Dennis mentioned in the presentation, unit prices of steel and materials have significantly increased. As an example, prior to inflationary periods, structural steel was $2.50 a pound installed, and now it's over $7. Just kind of give a breadth of why costs have or how costs have increased so much. Or another example is pavement cost went from little over $100 a ton to well over $200 a ton. So the increases are relative, and not a lot of them are, I guess, in excess of what you would see as inflationary, but a lot of our projects as of late have been difficult to keep up with, to estimate, and we've had regular reoccurrence of bids coming in higher than projects we were able to estimate for projects. So all of our values, it isn't the matter of lowering the cost of the project, it's the matter of having to estimate the project with respect to bid regressions and what the items cost. So I just wanted to provide that clarification there.
Thank you, Gary. I believe Liz would like to ask one follow-up question. Then I'd like to go to Richard. Then I'd like to go to the public.
I have a lot more to say on this.
And we'll have some chance in a moment, but I think the public needs to
So,
hear.
Gary, you've given me an engineer's response, but I have an overriding question, and that is, does VTrans expect the town of Brattleboro to give you a blank check for this estimate, and that we are on the hook for whatever increased estimate you have? Because really, my question is perhaps a policy question for your supervisors, because really a town like Brattleboro can't be expected to come up with another $1 million just at the stroke of a pen. And I think that you need to go back to VTrans and say, isn't there some state money, some federal money, some FEMA money, some whatever to reduce our input from 10% to 5%? Because really, the taxpayers of Brattleboro will not accept this, nor do I.
So I've been working back and forth with Sue Fillion in planning regarding possible grant opportunities that the town could apply for to help assist with this, and also referenced some state statute that can be considered as an option for capping the town's split. There's a prescribed tax rate increase that would cap the town's reimbursement total. I can't recall what that is off the top of my head. Without looking. This is a town-owned asset. I can't change that, of course. And it's on a class one town highway on the national highway system. So that's how it classifies. The only real way to reduce it to 5% is to have a bridge closure. That's not really a palatable solution to a lot of the traveling public or likely the town. But that's, Act 153 would allow for a town to close a structure for a share reduction to 5%. But I believe, and I wasn't involved during the early scoping conversations, but that wasn't a palatable solution at that time. So that's why we proceeded this direction.
I'm going to go to Richard next, and I see Representative Burke is on the line. And Molly, if you don't mind, I'd like to go to the public after this because we've been kicking it around up here for a while.
I am going to have to leave at 7:30, so that's why I was.
Yep.
Okay. Then Representative Burke, would you like to speak now?
I just have a little bit of information. It's sort of relevant to what you're talking about around the 5%. Is that I don't know if it was 2 or 3 years ago. Anyway, when Peter Elwell had asked me about this initially, when the cost was $500,000. And I had one of our attorney fiscal advisors come up with some language that would have created a 5% match for bridges that were in towns that were in the front of the book and that were in towns that were in opportunity zones. We were trying to like sort of narrow the scope of who might apply, who might be eligible for this. But I could not get anywhere with my committee, and the Senate just completely nixed it because VTrans nixed it. And I resurrected that language again this year, and I had a meeting with the chief engineer and talked about it, and he came back and, gave me no, we can't do that. So and the other thing I know is that the city of Winooski is experiencing the same situation. They have a bridge that's used by all the other towns, and they're having to, foot the bill. I don't know what theirs is, but anyway, I'm happy to keep seeing what I can do on this end to try to advocate for the town, but I just wanted to let you know what my efforts have been so far.
Thank you, Representative Burke. Richard, you had a question a while back?
Yeah, two quick questions. One, the 8-foot shoulder that would be on the new bridge, would that able to accommodate a bike lane? And also, I'm wondering, because that roadway, Route 9, is a heavy truck transportation route, would you expect significant traffic delays while the temporary bridge is in place? Or is this going to make traffic just flow?
So Green, please chime in, but the traffic speed limit through this area is 25 miles an hour for trucks and 30 for vehicles. Green International designed the temporary roadway for a 25 mile an hour condition. So it should not slow cars down significantly, but follow the speed limit. If they're traveling faster than the speed limit through this area, it likely won't feel comfortable with the geometry.
Thanks, Gary. Patrick, I think Dennis might need to be unmuted.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't realize that once I muted myself, I wouldn't be able to unmute.
Sorry about that. You want to add something?
Yeah, I would add to what Gary said, the fact that, the existing road is a straight section through here. It's a straight geometry, and most vehicles are not traveling the speed limit. We've been out there multiple times and observed vehicles traveling significantly faster than the speed limit. And so, as Gary mentioned, I think the new geometry or the temporary geometry will definitely help reduce those speeds during construction, as vehicles will need to weave. We don't expect there to be significant delays, but there will be some minor delays when they have to get equipment in and out, trucks in and out, materials. During those times, there'll typically be flaggers and police on site that would, temporarily close and approach, get those trucks in and out, and then would reopen the roadway back up.
Thanks, Dennis.
And to follow with the second question regarding the bike lane, the 8-foot shoulders would be adequate for the future striping of a bike lane. I believe there's a planning for a corridor project through this area for bike lane facilities, and having this width through the project matching the remainder of the corridor would allow that.
Yep.
Thank you,
Thank
Gary.
you.
So at this point, board, I'd like to hear from the public. Is there anybody in the room that would like to speak? No? Okay. So I do see, okay, yep. Please come to the microphone and identify yourself. And then we have somebody on Zoom.
Rick Morton. Just a observation. I live on Route 9. I see traffic come down from Wilmington I see wide traffic coming down with houses, half houses, flagging trucks, and they've got momentum going. I'm just thinking, going straight on a stretch of road with that kind of a vehicle, I see it, but it still makes you nervous. But coming to that spot and then curving around, I just wonder, you guys know what you're doing. You're the professionals, but I still want to raise that issue.
Thank you, Rick. Gary or Dennis, would you like to speak to that?
Sure, Gary, I could chime in.
Go ahead, Dennis. You can speak about the approach signing that we'd be putting up.
Exactly. So we would have advanced warning signage during construction. So there'd be PCMS boards, those digital boards that would have readouts that warn vehicles of an alternate route or a new geometry in the roadway upcoming, as they approach this area. There would be significant signage besides that as well, notifying drivers of upcoming curves in the roadway and things like that. Technically the speed limit is posted down to 25 for trucks and 30 for passenger vehicles. And, from a safety standpoint, there will also be concrete barrier installed to help, avoid any, vehicles from entering the job site, unexpectedly. There will also be guardrail on the approach to the temporary detour. So, if a vehicle was to, come off the roadway, there would be some guardrail there that would help, keep them within the detour. But the roadway is designed, even under temporary conditions, for the speed limit, for the design speed. So we not only do we design the geometry for the design speed, but we also run truck turning movements to make sure that trucks can pass one another, as there's oncoming traffic from a truck in both directions. We make sure that the geometry is wide enough to accommodate that.
Dennis, thank you. I wonder, would you just respond to whether the geometry was designed to accommodate trucks carrying mobile homes?
Size loads have to be, if they don't fit within a standard roadway width, they would need a special police escort and special permission from, the state to navigate the roadway. So I don't know how big those trailers are, whether they fit in a standard 11-foot travel lane or not. If they do not, they would be considered a oversized load, and they would need special escorts that would get them through this site.
Probably something that's going to need to be considered. There's a fair amount of that traffic on this route. Yeah.
That negates that.
Thank you. I think we have David Levenbach on Zoom. Or I'm wrong.
No, you are correct. Thank you very much, Mr. Griff. These are questions actually for the town, not the engineers. I appreciate it. Number one, I appreciate Ms. McLaughlin's fight for the 5% share rather than the 10%. First question of two is, when did the town first learn that the cost of the project had tripled, and which also triples our share? And I'll just note for the scale of this that $1.6 million, though I think some has already been set aside, is 7% of the FY25 budget for the town. The other question, which you may not like as much, is if, in fact, we are stuck with a $1.6 million share, might the amount that has not already been set aside come from ARPA funds? I recognize that you have set those aside for particular projects, but that money is still in the account. And so ARPA might be a way to soften this awful blow. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else in the public that would like to speak? And then maybe I'll bring those questions back to the board and the town and its discussion in a moment. Okay, seeing no hands on Zoom and no hands in the room, I think we'll come back to the board. At this point, would somebody like to make a motion? Elizabeth?
I move that we hold on this item to discuss it further and vote at another time once we've heard whether VTrans is willing to reduce the municipal share.
Okay, let's have discussion about that motion.
I'm completely in
Peter?
favor of that.
Anyone else, Franz?
Yeah, I have a number of things to raise, some of which Liz has already raised, although I certainly agree with the motion that she's made. First of all, it hasn't been mentioned that the Massachusetts Turnpike is closed to trucks of 40 tons or greater between Lee and I think it's Westfield or Westboro. Anyway, there's a major section of the Mass Pike that is not accepting the heaviest trucks. Now, where are those trucks going? I think a lot of them are diverting to Route 9. Now, there's an alternate route in Massachusetts, but the alternate route itself is closed from, I think, 7 till 9 a.m. and 4 to 6 in the afternoon. So if I'm a trucker, I'm just saying, the heck with it. I'll go from Albany over to the coast or wherever I'm going on Route 9. And so effectively, we're bearing the brunt of a lot of traffic that has nothing to do with our town, and I think it's entirely appropriate for the state to pick up that cost. And I think a good way to do that would be the 5% match instead of the 10% match. And, you know, having talked with Molly Burke a little bit earlier, it really seems like VTrans was the key player in negating the possibility of getting that 5% match. Now, I can't testify to that myself, but if that's the case, then VTrans needs to do an about-face on that and say, yeah, hey, that makes a lot of sense if you want to get this project done. And I apologize for getting a little bit excited, but I think this is just, you know, really crazy to come and tell us that we need to go from, you know, $500,000 up to $1.6 million on our contribution. Quite honestly, I have trouble seeing it happen with those numbers. I won't rule it out. Maybe I can be persuaded of the necessity of this, but we got a bridge there already, quite honestly. I've been driving over that bridge for the last 50 years. It's not my favorite bridge. I was frankly kind of excited about getting it replaced, but not with this kind of numbers. So anyway, there's a lot to talk about here. I think we have to send this back to the state level to get a more definitive opinion on what's available in terms of financial help.
Thank you, Franz. Is there any further discussion on Liz's motion that we hold off this matter until such a time that VTrans comes back with a reduced share to Brattleboro?
Well, no, I mean, again, you know, I agree. I don't think that we do this any other way. I think, you know, having dealt with pandemic pricing and having dealt with these increases, this is generally ludicrous that this goes up 3 times. This is why I asked the question, the difference between the classification of a 6 and a 5. That answer wasn't satisfactory to me. I think that bridge will eventually need to be replaced, but I would really like to see this thing come back to us with a 5% match so that we can move on this project.
Thanks, Peter. Richard, did you want to weigh in on this? You're not required to. I'm just
well, no, but I am in agreement with the discussion that's we're having here about the money, and I think it is premature to invest in that kind of a outlay of money right now.
It's literally highway robbery.
Very well. I would just like to bring back David Levenbach's question. When did we learn about the cost increase? If we could just answer that.
I can answer that. We received notice about this on February 5th, I think, Gary, and scheduled a meeting as soon as we could on it.
Great. Thank you, John. And the use of ARPA funds to cover this potential project?
The ARPA funds have been committed, so they are not available. This would be the required payments for this would be in fiscal 27 and 28, so that would give you 3 years to capitalize this expenditure. That's what I would recommend we look at if we had to to pay the 1.6 million. 515,000 is already in the capital fund and set aside for this project, but the additional 1.1 million or so could be capitalized over 3 fiscal years, if you so.
Thanks, John. Is there any additional discussion? Liz has made a motion to hold off on this matter until such a time that VTrans comes back to Brattleboro with a reduced share. So
Is it possible to put some sort of a timeline on that so that this is not one of those projects that's hanging out there forever? Because I understand that when a bridge is in disrepair, I mean, things can go south. So I don't want this thing to be this dangling thing that's out there. Is that a feasible request?
If I could speak to that.
Do you have knowledge of that?
Yeah, no, just that Molly Burke is very actively concerned about this, and I think we could probably leave it in her hands to try to make things happen at the state level.
Yeah, I'm more or less talking about like some accountability to this body as it sits to make sure that we're kind of making sure that this is not getting kicked down the road and that there is some action at a local government level here. I appreciate the work that Molly Burke is doing. I know about the work that Molly Burke is doing, and I support that. But I think, if we can, whatever a reasonable time frame is, to come back and check in with these folks.
Mm-hmm. I think it's important that VTrans understands the level of concern that the town of Brattleboro has towards these increased numbers. And I would suggest that our town manager work with Molly Burke to negotiate this matter with VTrans.
Okay. Would you like to amend your own motion to include that?
I don't think that's necessary.
Okay.
I understand.
Is that clear?
Yep.
Yeah. Gary and Dennis, could you speak to the implications of us not proceeding to final design today and not executing the project finance and maintenance agreement today?
Sure. So we have some items in the queue right now that we're working to address for utility relocations and wrapping up some of the concerns with site design. We can continue with that effort, and then once that effort is complete, the design team will then be put on hold until a decision is made to proceed.
Thanks, Gary. So, Select Board, Liz has made a motion that we hold off on this matter until such a time as VTrans comes back to Brattleboro with a reduced share of the cost. John's been given some direction. Is there any further discussion about that motion? Okay, seeing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 5-0. Gary, Dennis, I thank you for your time this evening, and we will move on to, would you like to speak to this real quick? Could you come to the microphone, please? No one on TV will hear you otherwise. Could you just introduce yourself?
Jennifer Smith.
Thank you.
So VTrans is the one who let us know about this meeting tonight. So since we're going to revisit this, is somebody going to notify us when the next meeting comes to the select board again?
Sure.
Thank you.
I hope so. Yes, and that would be
I
our
wouldn't have
request.
known about this if VTrans didn't tell us last week when we met. So if somebody could notify us if it's coming to the select board meeting
Absolutely.
again.
It's a very fair point.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Select Board, so that passed 5-0. John, you have a question?
Yeah, just if Ms. Smith could get us her contact information so that we know how to reach her. That would be great.
Sure.
Thank you.
You won't have it, but I will give it to you again.
Okay.
Let's just make sure we have it, yeah. Okay. Thanks, guys. Gary, Dennis, thank you for your time this evening, and we'll be in touch, I hope. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, board. Well, so agenda setting out the window. We are 30 minutes behind our schedule, and that's okay. That was an important discussion. The next item on the agenda is representative town meeting follow-up items, and I believe Patrick is going to walk us through his delightful memo.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
So it is tonight, I believe, April 2nd. Representative town meeting was March 23rd, not too long ago. And there were a variety of items that were raised and discussed and debated and actually moved and passed at that meeting. And usually about this time after representative town meeting, we just do a little follow-up with the board as to things that transpired and what their status is. So included with the memorandum is a copy of the fiscal 25 budget as was passed by representative town meeting. You'll recall that at the meeting, $70,000 was added to, $70,000 was added. The recommendation was that the additional funds be added to the set aside for the Global Warming Solutions Fund, and that budget has been prepared and included in your backup. There's nothing the board needs to do, no action anyone needs to take. It's just the final numbers after representative town meeting. With respect to the bond vote, in case you hadn't heard, the bond vote passed. 96 affirmative votes and 1 negative vote. We'll be working with the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund to prepare a loan application. We'll bring that back to the board when it's ready for your approval. We've got a determination on fiscal 26 human services funding, which shall not exceed 2% of the fiscal 25 budget. Based on the new value for fiscal 25 budget, there will be a not to exceed value of $461,276.60 for human services funding included based on the work of the Human Services Committee in the fiscal 26 budget. There was a resolution during other business on the war in Gaza, and a transcript of that resolution in the minutes have been sent to the legislative delegation in Washington, D.C., as was requested by the motion during the meeting. There was a motion to recommend that the town develop a video on how to steer your way through Robert's Rules of Order and to sort of empower representatives to better understand how to participate in the meeting. It was pointed out at the time by Andy Davis that there is such a video. It was prepared, I believe, last year. It might have been the year before. And that it came with a simplified one-page Robert's Rules of Order for representative town meeting, and that too is on the town's website. Unless we hear otherwise, we're considering that matter addressed.
I'm sorry, Patrick, but I'd like to point out that that's actually a 2-page summary of Robert's Rules, not a 1-page summary.
Well, it is quite extensive.
Just in case anybody's looking for it, they should realize it's 2 pages.
It is one single piece of paper.
It could be 2 sides, yes.
You're both right. There was a resolution, or a motion rather, on ranked choice voting that also passed. There was no recommendation included in the, let me step back. There was a recommendation that representative town meeting sentiment about ranked choice voting be presented to the state legislature, and there was no specific follow-up identified with that. Staff recommends that the town send a copy of the article and the meeting minutes to Brattleboro's state legislative delegation. If that's in keeping with the board's wishes, we'll make that happen right away. And then lastly, there was a article under other business about a virtual option and free lunch, and these stemmed from the work of the RTM steering committee that was around for about a year, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I guess what I would suggest is that the board considers how to warn representative town meeting each and every year. You set the warning, and that describes where and when and gives us pretty clear direction as to how the meeting shall be conducted. So We don't think there's necessarily a decision that the board needs to make at this particular time. When it's time to set the meeting warning, we'll have a better sense of the conditions in the world around us. That typically happens in January. As for a free lunch, spent a good deal of time debating that. I think last year, and it failed to pass, setting aside funds for lunch. Staff would just point out that it's not uncommon for any of the surrounding communities around us that hold a regular town meeting to organize a potluck where, there really isn't necessarily any expense to the town, but if folks wanted to build a sense of community, something like that is always possible for someone to step up and organize.
Great. Thank you, Patrick.
Yes, sir.
Is that the end of your presentation? Liz seems very excited to go into something, but I'd like you to finish if...
The very last thing, the only other matter is there was quite a bit of discussion around use of fund balance and the board's policy on this. And so if the board was inclined, the agenda setting committee could be looking at or considering whether or not to take a fresh look at the use of fund balance policy. And that's available to the board when you see fit.
Great. Thank you. Elizabeth.
Yes, thank you. So those items about lunch, et cetera, I'll be happy to discuss them in January when the time comes. But I did notice that many RTM members were not aware that a lunch was given by a high school group and that there was childcare. And I think both of those meetings could be both of those items could be better publicized in addition to whatever decisions are made in January.
Great.
Very
Thank
good.
you, Elizabeth. I just want to point out that whilst no motion is required on this article in our administrative report, we are kind of being asked to weigh in, so maybe we could just have a little discussion about whether we want to send the ranked choice voting sentiment to the legislative delegation. Is there anyone opposed to doing that? Okay, not seeing a lot of opposition there, so I think that is the will of the board.
It may be the will of RTM that we bring that to our legislative delegation. It hasn't been determined that that was also the will of the select board.
Right. I'm not saying that we concur with their thoughts about ranked choice voting, but we simply are
passing on.
Helping Patrick out by saying, yes, why not send it to the legislative delegation? I think that's what we're doing here.
Yes.
Right?
That's as I read it.
Very good. Right. Very good. Okay. Does anyone else have a question about Patrick's presentation or a comment they'd like to make that is on the select board?
I thank Patrick for it.
Okay. Anyone else? I will raise a couple of things then. So the fund balance policy review, I think, is an important thing for us to do. That was clearly something that the meeting was curious about. So Liz, myself, and John will get that on an agenda at some point in the near future. And the one thing that kind of stuck out to me from town meeting that's sort of referenced here is the amount of money that's going into the Global Warming Solutions Fund. The history behind that amount of money was that it was a proposal from a community member to go into a different source, and we created this fund that was funded in to the same extent that that community member wanted the money to go elsewhere. And so I think it wouldn't hurt as part of our budget discussion this year to just take a look at that fund transfer and make sure that it's an amount that seems appropriate. And so unless there's great opposition to that, maybe it's something we can just talk about during the budget season.
Sounds great, Daniel.
Okay, good. Any other comments or questions from the board before we go over to the public? Okay, members of the public who would like to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none. I don't think we have.
We don't need a motion.
A motion there. You have some clear guidance.
I have some guidance. Yep.
Okay. And it is 7:55, and I'm going to say that we will adjourn for a 5-minute break. Okay, we came back from our little break. It's 8:00 something, and we're going to move into new business item C, Select Board housekeeping. And oh Lord, I'm going to walk us through this one, so apologies in advance. Okay, nice 2-page memo, which I will mostly just summarize. So we have several things to do here. We need to agree upon a rotation schedule for reviewing and signing warrants. Warrants is the fancy town word for the document that shows everything that got paid. And the select board is required to sign off on such a thing. The second thing we need to do is assign select board members to various boards and committees. And we need to have a discussion of our rules for conduct, meetings, and hearings, which will take up most of this time. We're going to review select board goals, and we're going to talk about scheduling a select board retreat. And if the board would indulge me, I would just like to take each of these one by one.
Sure.
Great. So we will begin with the rotation schedule for reviewing and signing warrants 2024 to 2025. There are 5 little windows of time: April 2nd to July 2nd, July 2nd to October 1st, October 1st to December 16th, December 16th to January 14th, and January 14th to March 24th. Do I hear any volunteers or any discussion? Lord forbid there be discussion of this.
Discussion.
Good heavens. Franz Reichsmann.
Why are the periods of time so uneven?
I don't know.
I mean,
would somebody like to
I'll volunteer for the December 16th to January 14th.
That's an interesting one. Patrick, have you got any insight into that, or John?
I honestly don't.
Is it a typo, perhaps?
Probably a typo.
Yeah.
We can,
do you want to fix it, Franz, seeing as you've...
But it's not one typo. I don't know.
I think it used to be 4.
It should, ideally it would be, 10 weeks plus a couple of days if you divide it up evenly, but...
If you go on, I'll try to figure it out.
Thanks, John. We'll move on to the next one, and we'll come back to that.
Oh, yeah, the dates are wrong.
Lord, oh, Lord. All right, well, I guess we'll move on to sub-item 2, annual select board assignments, boards, and committees. So we have a whole raft of...
Can I just add that I'm reviewing the warrants, and I'll continue to review them until this matter's settled, if you'd like.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So noted. All right. So we need to appoint members to the following boards, and maybe I'll just read them. And if you get excited about one, you could raise your hand, and we'll write your name down. In the event of there being multiple people who are excited, we will figure it out somehow, possibly even voting. So first of all, we have the Capital Grant Review Board. The Capital Grant Review Board meets rarely to advise the Select Board on grants for capital projects and purchases. Is there a Select Board member or 2 Select Board members who are excited to join that board that meets rarely? Are you nominating yourself?
I am.
Elizabeth?
I love meetings that meet rarely.
So Elizabeth, Franz, are you...
I'd be happy to join that. It raises another issue, though, which is, as I understand it, the Capital Grants Review Board doesn't really do anything. I mean, I don't know why we're appointing ourselves to boards that don't do anything. I mean,
that's a great question. Is that a serious question?
Maybe we should think about this from the really functional standpoint. And maybe there's more that goes in. I mean, I remember this going by last year, and we assigned ourselves to all these committees, and I was brand new on the board, and I didn't know anything about it. But this year, I'm looking at things a little more critically and thinking, hey, why are we doing this?
You know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking that we've discussed that longer than a meeting would take.
Yeah, probably so.
Meeting.
But if we want to do it in a rational way, we could consider, is this something important, or is this something we should not do, or I don't know. Anyway, we can go right past that, and I'll be on the Capital Grants Review Board, but at some point we should maybe think about this.
Great. So we're going to put Elizabeth and Franz down for the Capital Grant Review Board. Is there a proposal there that we look at the reason why these boards exist, or should they still exist?
Or hear
That's a whole
why
other story.
why they're necessary.
So we have the town attorney and the assistant town manager raising their hand. Who would like to be recognized first? Okay, go ahead, Patrick.
Sorry, just the Capital Grants Review Committee is included in the town charter, and you have a Charter Revision Commission currently that is going line by line and chapter by chapter through the charter, and I know that's a matter of some ongoing discussion.
Bob, would you like to add anything to that?
That's exactly what I was going to say.
And so am I right in understanding that we really can't be deciding to just, we need to appoint two people to that committee, and whether the committee will continue to exist is sort of with the Charter Review Commission?
Correct.
Very good. Okay, so we'll appoint Elizabeth and Franz. The next committee, the Hazard Mitigation Committee, no description, but I recall it being significant, especially when there's a review of the hazard mitigation plan. Is there any member that would like to be on that? I remember Ian Goodnow was on it and went to a ton of meetings.
Really?
But I think that was like they were adopting something. Maybe Dan could speak to that? No? Okay. John, are you able to speak to the hazard mitigation?
I'll do that and get myself off the other one if you'd like.
You could do both. I think it meets infrequently enough that you'll be okay.
Okay.
And if I'm wrong, we can always revisit. Yeah. Okay, the Rental Housing Improvement Program Loan Committee.
Does that meet often? Or?
Let's find out. Let's see. So, according to this, it meets rarely.
Okay.
Richard Davis on the Rental Housing Improvement Program Loan Committee. Who thought this would be so much fun? Okay. Next up, we've got the Small Business Assistance Program Loan Committee, which I believe meets occasionally, which is slightly more often than rarely.
I will,
Peter?
I will toss my hat into that ring.
Okay, very good. Not seeing any other people interested, so that's great. Traffic Safety Committee. This is probably the most, heavily scheduled.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, you're currently on it.
I'm currently on it. If someone else would prefer to be on it, because I'm vice chair, I will give up my favorite position as a member of the Traffic Safety Committee to someone else, or I will continue as my colleagues wish.
Okay, any thoughts on the Traffic Safety Committee? Franz, Richard, Peter, not Daniel?
Okay, I'm in.
Okay. Are you happy with that?
I am.
Yeah, it's a really important committee, and you've done really good work on it the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Okay, so the following one-year select board appointments will be, oh, yes, that's true. Deerfield Valley Communications Union District Governing Board. So we already have Patrick Morland as our representative, doing a great job there, and you need some alternates. Would you like to speak to that?
Yes, sir.
Great.
So if the board so pleases, I would need to be reappointed. And Sue Fillion has been our alternate, and I spoke with her earlier today, and she'd be willing to continue on as the alternate if the board so chooses.
Does the board accept that?
We're so choosing. Yes.
We have so chosen.
Does that mean I just got fired? My work on this board was so fulfilling. I didn't need
We're talking about the Deerfield Valley Communications Union District. Were you on that?
I thought so.
Were you an alternate?
I spent the whole entire
Would you like
year
to be
thinking
alternate
I was.
number 2?
We have 2 alternates.
Sorry, if you don't need.
You totally can be.
More alternates, sure.
All right.
Absolutely.
I would miss it.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll have Patrick Morland as our representative and Sue Fillion as alternate 1, Peter Case alternate 2. In the unlikely event that you need it. I guess if Patrick and Sue go a conference or something, you're in the hot seat.
I guess so.
All right. Next, we've got the Wyndham Solid Waste Management District Board of Supervisors. This is currently represented by Patrick Morland with John Potter as the alternate. Would you guys like to speak to that? John, Patrick, no?
Patrick's been doing a great job at this one as well.
Okay.
Patrick, would you be willing to say just a little bit about what decisions get made there, or how you participate, or something? Just out of my curiosity.
Well, I believe there's, I could be wrong about this. I think there are 13 towns represented in the Wyndham Solid Waste Management District. Together, we oversee the operations of the district, which include producing the solid waste implementation plan for the region, providing education and outreach to businesses, schools, individuals, promoting the benefits of recycling, organics composting, and the like. For all participating towns, there is a household hazardous waste collection opportunity. There is one routinely during the warmer months of the year. I think it runs from basically April to October. I could be wrong on the dates there. There is a site in Brattleboro where household hazardous waste can be delivered to. There are on occasion, usually once a year, remote sites elsewhere throughout the district. The district is as far away as Jamaica and Wardsboro, so sometimes getting into Brattleboro with hazardous waste is a little bit of a challenge, so sometimes there are some remote hazardous waste collection sites established. Each year we pass a budget and oversee, I'm sort of just ad-libbing here, we oversee the composting facility at the district. We're currently working on expanding the compost facility. We're a licensed commercial small facility. We're working towards becoming a licensed commercial medium-sized facility. Our belief is that there's going to be continued pressure in the years to come for organics composting. And, we're really in good place and in good position to serve that need in this region.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. It sounds like you're quite knowledgeable of this, and I'm wondering if the board will consent to Patrick continuing to be our representative.
Absolutely.
100%.
Well, of course.
Very good.
How about that other guy?
And John, you'll consent to being the alternate?
I will, unless one of you wants to do it.
No.
Okay.
No.
I've already got my fill.
Okay.
In that position.
And the only other committee that's on our meeting materials is the Wyndham Regional Commission. But I am certain that in a previous meeting we appointed a staff member and a community member to that position.
Sue Fillion and Ralph and Emma were appointed at your last meeting.
Very good. So
You
am I right in thinking that we don't need to do anything?
Correct.
Very good. Richard.
Excuse me. Do you know who it is? I have to fill this paper.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sue Fillion. She is our planning director. And Ralph Mimer, who is a community member. And we can always get you spellings later if you'd like. Okay, board. So we did the annual select board assignments to boards and committees. Congratulations. John has been working diligently behind the scenes to get us a warrant reviewing schedule. John.
I've got you about a 10-week schedule, and so we're looking for somebody to do April 2nd to June 11th.
Okay.
Any takers?
I'll do that.
Go.
Oh, okay.
That's fine.
Fight between yourselves.
As you wish.
I just, if I do it now, I won't forget. If I
Okay.
wait till June, I'll forget.
Peter.
June 11th to August 20th.
I'll do that.
Richard.
August 20th to October 29th.
That's my birthday time, so that should be me, I think.
Daniel. October.
Happy birthday.
Yeah.
October.
Sign the warrants.
October 29th to January 7th, so all the holidays.
It's not my birthday time. But I'll do it.
Okay, Franz. And then that leaves Liz.
And Liz. January 7th to March 24th.
And people will be notified by, who does this these days?
Jessica.
Melissa?
It depends. So
Okay.
Melissa
Julia?
and Julia. Yep.
Yeah.
You'll get an email saying, hey, can you come and sign these things, please? Can you come and review these things and then sign
I
them?
didn't quite get all those dates.
Yeah.
John can pass it along to you.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Richard, for being a diligent clerk. Okay, so we took care of item 1 then. And now we're going to do the meat of this agenda item, which is the Select Board Rules of Conduct. And I hope nobody wants me to read this whole document. Okay.
Do you have to comment to me?
Would you like to be recognized?
I thought there was some discussion about the completeness of this item.
Yes. So earlier,
I'm confused.
Earlier, I mentioned that the consent rules, I believed, were in this. However, now we're wondering if this is the right version because we couldn't find it in there. So
okay,
someplace I know I've seen procedures for that, but
okay,
it should probably be in here.
Well, so we do have a proposed motion in here. If anybody would like to make it, and we can kick it around a little bit and decide if we want to do that. But we are referring here to the rules of conduct for meetings and hearings, which have numerous sections and subsections, which I could summarize if you'd like. I think the public should probably know a little bit about it. Elizabeth?
They are on page.
I move to approve the rules for conduct of meetings and hearings for 2024-2025 as presented or modified.
Very well. Well, we'll decide if we're doing it as presented or modified when we get to that point. I will just summarize real quick what's in this. So the first section A is about the conduct of our select board meetings. So it says like who chairs them, quorums, about the business of the agenda being what we're working on, how the business is conducted, how public members are recognized, and that there's always a public participation section, that meetings may be recessed, provided they are recessed to a time and place certain. And it also notes when our regular meetings happen, and that we also use Robert's Rules of Order for anything that's not listed here, I guess. Then there's a section about the conduct of public hearings, which is much more prescribed. We have a section about other public hearings and meetings, a section about conflict of interest, which gives guidance for how board members can express a conflict of interest. Maybe Bob wants to speak to, so this section about conflict of interest also has a thing about disqualification and disclosure and recusal. I might ask you to speak to that in a minute and finish summarizing. Okay. A section about requests of the town manager, so how we should go about that. A section about warrants, which is those accounts payable things that we just decided upon. A section explaining our procedure for how we appoint residents of the town to boards to fill vacancies, which is always fun when we get to do that. And then a section about the procedure for consideration of select board items. And I think that is honestly one of the most important pieces of this for board members to know and community members to know. And I guess with the board's consent, I'll just read it, because otherwise, how will you know? Okay, so here's the procedure. By prior agreement or vote of a majority of select board members at a previously scheduled select board meeting, the item shall be placed on the agenda for the next regularly scheduled select board meeting. So that means that were this board to say we want such an item to be on an agenda, were a majority of the board to do that, then it would go on our next agenda. You have a question, Franz?
Yes. So how would that item get to be discussed at the select board meeting if it's not on the agenda?
Is this a quiz or a genuine
No, this is a procedural question where it says, by prior agreement or vote of a majority of select board members at a previously scheduled select board meeting, how does that vote come about?
I see. So how I read this, and Bob, chime in if you read it differently, is that the board in a select board meeting says, we want such an item to be on an agenda. And then the next available meeting, that item magically appears. And so I think the previously scheduled meeting is that meeting where we were talking about wanting it to be on
Yes,
the agenda.
but where during the previous scheduled meeting would that be in order to make that motion?
Bob?
Many times that might come up under some public participation where somebody raises an issue and the board says, wow, that is a really important, I move that we put that on the next agenda, and if the majority votes that, then it would go on that next agenda. Or it might be something that flows out of a discussion in an already agenda item that leads to something else. But it's that way of setting it to say we need to talk about that at that next meeting.
Okay. Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, so what I'm wondering is if I just have an idea that I think should be on the agenda and I want other board members to chime in, can I just bring that up at a meeting? I don't know where I would or when I would do that. Yes, if it comes up as part of some other discussion, but how about if I'm trying to bring it up de novo?
Yeah. Town manager is pointing to the select board comments part of the agenda, so maybe flagging it there would alert.
So that would be an opportunity to say, hey, there's something I want to see on the agenda.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the rules do also speak to the process by which a select board member may get something on the agenda. And I will get to that in just a minute.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
So any other questions around item 1 there? I think it's really important that everybody knows how to use this because this is how you make things happen. So number 2, consideration of items to be reviewed by the chair and vice chair at the regular agenda setting meeting for inclusion in the regularly scheduled select board meeting shall be done in the following manner. Oh boy, here we go. A, by written request of a select board member by 5 p.m. the Wednesday prior to a scheduled meeting. This request would be addressed to the town manager's office. Questions about that? It's pretty clear.
So that's after the agenda committee has already set the agenda.
And I had the same question. It doesn't exactly align with our current schedule.
Right, so then the agenda would be modified somehow?
Probably. I think I asked the exact same question last year and was given the answer that the town manager would accommodate that person, presuming that the chair and the vice chair were in agreement. Is that how you see it? And is that how you see it, Town Attorney?
My only question there is whether that should be 4 p.m. because of when the chair and the vice chair typically meet at 4 p.m.
And should it say Monday instead of Wednesday?
Yeah.
I mean, I think in the past, and this may be a carryover from prior set meetings of the chair and vice chair, and so that deadline should really be by the time when the chair and the vice chair meet with the town manager's office. That would make the most sense for purposes of how that would get on there.
That makes sense to me. Is that something that's making sense to you guys?
So when do you meet?
So we've only had one meeting. It was on a Monday at 4:30 p.m., and that is definitely a time that works for me, and I believe it's a time that works for Liz.
And it works.
John will accommodate.
It works for us to get the materials put together before we can warn it as well. That's why earlier in the week is better than Wednesday.
So do we want to modify this to say 4 p.m. on a Monday?
Seems reasonable. Yeah, I think that would be excellent.
Okay, sounds like we do.
On Monday.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Very good. So that's one
but
way.
it's not the Monday prior, it's the previous Monday.
Correct.
So it's Monday, 8 days prior to a meeting.
Oh, good point.
Yes.
So now I'm confused. So is it the Monday before the meeting?
No. If you want to get something on a select board agenda and you are a select board member, you could write to the town manager's office. You could write to John and say, I'd like this item to be considered on the agenda. And if you get it in before 4 p.m. on a Monday, it'll be considered at the next possible opportunity.
So it
is how I understand it.
Correct. And I think it should be by 4 p.m. the Monday, the week prior to a scheduled meeting.
Okay.
So look
a week prior.
Look at it as 2
prior.
Mondays, so 2 Mondays before.
Because we draft the agenda on 2 Mondays. Like we drafted this agenda last Monday.
Not yesterday.
Not yesterday.
Correct.
We wouldn't have had time to.
Wasn't it Wednesday?
I don't know. Okay, this all seems very clear.
Good to read through this.
So we're happy with 4 p.m. the Monday prior to the week before.
The week prior. Yeah.
The week prior.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
the language.
that's good.
Very good. And then B, a Brattleboro, can it say resident instead of citizen, please?
Yes.
A Brattleboro resident or group may write to whom? The town manager, a select board member, or the town manager, or chair, or vice chair?
Well,
Town manager is easiest.
Then it's your responsibility.
I know.
You know.
Yes, let's say town manager.
Okay.
So by written request of the town manager, of a Brattleboro resident or group to the town manager by 4 p.m. the week prior to the next scheduled select board meeting, is what that should read.
The Monday. Wait.
Yes, thank you.
Monday, the week prior.
This is really nitpicky, but I would argue for parallel construction with the previous
Yes.
clause,
I think that's
where
what
it says
we're
the
doing.
request
I'm
would be
trying-
addressed to the town manager's office.
I
would
think that's
just-
literally what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Yes, except that the language quoted was not identical, and I'm suggesting.
Very
it
good.
should be.
I understand the intent, and I think we can make that happen. Okay, C, at the request of the town manager, so that's the town manager making a request of Liz and I at the agenda setting committee meeting. That's a very common way of getting things on the agenda. And then D, by any state or federal entity for items requiring select board authorization. Is that what VTrans did?
Yep.
Pretty much?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. And like Amtrak and all that stuff.
Yep.
So, community members, those are the 4 ways that you can get things on an agenda. And then, I've got to read this number 3. My Lord, I've given myself a task here. Okay, I'll just read it. So 3, unless placed on the agenda pursuant to the provisions of paragraph G1 above, so that's select board members agreeing, in order for a request to be placed on the select board agenda, the chair and vice chair or designee must both agree on placement of a proposed item. So unless in a select board meeting, a majority of the select board says we want this on the agenda, both the chair and the vice chair have to agree that the item will be placed on an agenda. Yes, France?
Who is this mysterious designee?
I don't know. Maybe it's like if one of us is sick or something like that.
But, I mean, who gets to designate?
I will interrogate the town attorney on his opinion.
Sorry, I was looking at one other thing. Sorry.
Yeah, so Franz is asking in section 3, the first paragraph, it says the request needs to be given to the chair and vice chair who must agree, but there's also a mention of a designee. Who might that be?
That would be if either the chair or the vice chair can't make that meeting, if you're designating somebody else, another board member, to be in your place instead for that meeting.
Yeah.
That's what I think the designee.
So it would specifically be a board member designated by the person who's going to be absent.
That's right. Yep.
And I think in my experience of chair and vice chair, we always make it happen. You know, and we might need to reschedule occasionally, but yeah, okay. So you want to leave the designee in there?
Yeah, it's okay. I just wanted to understand what that was.
Good. This is important. Should both the chair and vice chair agree that an item should not be on the agenda, the item will not be placed on the regular warned agenda and other board members will be notified. So if Liz and I get a request for an item and we say, nope, we will not put it on the agenda and we will tell you all about it.
And that would include any delays, like it's not on this agenda, it may or may not be on a subsequent agenda.
Huh. It's a good question. Mm-hmm. I've always kind of thought about it as just like, no, this will not be considered on any agenda.
Well, no, because it could be raised again.
Oh,
yeah.
I think we're misunderstanding. So, can you repeat your question?
Yeah, so my question was, we agree that the matter should be on the agenda. It's just not going to be on this agenda.
Yeah. And so maybe in that case, I think what we'd probably do is we'd say to the person who proposed it, hey, we can't get it on this agenda for reason X. There probably would be a reason, but we will put it on this agenda.
So the notification still stands.
Yes, good. Questions about this? Richard and
Do
then
you
Francis.
think there should be a time frame put with that?
I don't know. What does the board think?
I don't know how you mean.
Well, if,
In the notification.
if say somebody wanted something on the agenda and it's not going to be on it, how much notice should they get that it's not going to be there?
I think the decision would be made in the agenda setting committee meeting on a Monday around 4:30, and we'd probably be able to notify them that day.
Okay.
Let's give ourselves till the next day.
How about that?
How about that?
Yeah. So we want to amend that to say they'd be notified by
5 p.m.
end of
the
business on
following day.
Tuesday?
The Tuesday, the week prior.
Yes, very good.
A week prior.
You might want to cut yourself some slack, but that's a good goal.
I don't think it's too hard to do, but
So
we'll see.
I have
Go
another
ahead.
question about that. Now, the first sentence in section 3 specifically refers to paragraph G1, and that that if the select board votes to put it on the agenda, then it doesn't have to be approved by the chair and vice chair. Okay, so
Absolutely.
that's an alternate pathway. But then the next thing, it says the chair and vice chair agree that an item should not be on the agenda, but it doesn't make any reference to paragraph G1. So can the chair and vice chair then take something that the board has voted on and wipe it off the agenda?
So, no, is the answer to that question.
It's already in G.
And then in the event of the chair and vice chair saying, we don't want this on the agenda, that's usually because it's usually coming from someone other than the select board in a meeting. It could be from a select board member, and that person would be notified, and then we're going to get to the next paragraph, which tells us what happens after that.
So I would suggest that the unless placed on the agenda pursuant to the provisions of paragraph G1 above also be included in that second sentence to make it clear that the chair and vice chair cannot remove an item that's already been approved by the full board.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Bob, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I think we
board
can
have any
edit that.
It makes
John,
it
does
a
that-
little clearer. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, it looks like John is making that notation there, but.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Francis.
Thank you.
This is great. We're really doing some work here. In the event that the chair and vice chair disagree regarding placement of an item on the agenda, the item shall be forwarded to the select board for a vote as to placement on the agenda, and then there's a process for that here. So somebody brings an agenda item to the agenda setting committee. Liz wants it on. I don't want it on. We can't agree. So then we do the following. We forward that to the select board, and I'll just read it because I can't do it from memory. If a majority of select board members, that is 3 members, votes to place an item on the agenda, the item will be placed on the next regularly scheduled select board meeting for consideration. The item will not be discussed or considered at the meeting during which it was voted to be placed on the agenda. The item will be discussed on the agenda for the meeting at which it was placed. That sounds a little convoluted, but here's what it means. The rest of the board would make a decision as to whether or not that agenda item should be on an agenda. And the question would be, should this thing be on an agenda? They would discuss that. They wouldn't discuss the item itself. They wouldn't discuss the agenda item. And then when it shows up on an agenda, we would then have a full discussion about it like we do usually, like this very fulsome discussion. Clear? Dr. Rice?
Almost. So, yeah, I get that sort of, but what it doesn't say is when the select board, when will it be forwarded and in what form? I mean, the only time we could talk about it would be at a warned meeting. So it would have to come up at the next warned meeting, whether to discuss it at the next subsequent warned meeting.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
So, I mean, it just, I think maybe it should say something about how it gets from the disagreeable pair to the select board.
Right. And I think we've had this maybe once during our time.
I remember it happened, and we discussed it under, there's probably an item on the agenda that said
Consideration
agenda setting.
of,
Yeah,
yeah.
consideration of, and then we voted, and then it went through the agenda setting process for the next available meeting.
Yeah. So I think Franz is asking for just a little more clarity.
Yeah, just that it would go on the agenda. The question of whether this should go on an agenda goes on the next agenda.
Yes.
Okay.
1,000% yes. Do we need to clean up that language? And if so, what is it going to say?
I'm sure that Bob and John can clean that
We
up.
can just add in the next agenda or next meeting in that.
Yeah, it should be so.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
It's
Okay, go ahead.
And by the way, so I would hope that because we're making a lot of changes here, that we'll just bring back a red line draft and Richard doesn't have to. Okay.
Yes.
That'd be great.
Richard, don't worry about it. We got
I'm working on it.
notes.
He's the clerk,
All right, board. So let's keep going because we've chosen this path and we must get to the end. As with any item voted by a select board member, a proposal must have the affirmative vote of 3 select board members to constitute a positive vote. I don't think that's
pretty
that
cut and dry.
complicated. In the event of defeat of the item by a majority of select board members, the board will not consider the agenda item. Straightforward as well, right?
I don't agree with it, but it's straightforward.
Yeah, this is democracy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then D, citizen input, resident input, please, will be limited to comments on placement of an item on the agenda. So just like how we will not discuss the agenda item, we will discuss the should it be on an agenda. And that's what the community would be expected to discuss as well. Right, Bob?
correct.
Very good. Specific discussions, blah, blah, blah. Okay, select board. We just edited the heck out of these proposed rules of conduct.
No,
Is
we
there
didn't.
anything further that you would like to say about these proposed rules of conduct?
Yes, we only did the last section, really.
Yes,
The
and I do
earlier
not intend to
sections-
do a line item review of every other section.
Well, then you shall tell us how we do have our input on those other sections.
You can speak to it right now, but I'm not going to read the whole
Oh,
thing.
okay. Well, I guess the biggest one that I bumped up against was in section A, number 6.
Okay, so
Where it says there shall be reserved a period during each regular and special meeting of the select board for public comment on any issue. And my understanding, based on having been on the board the past year, is that there might be some issues where people are not permitted to speak, that there are in fact limits. It's not on any issue. It says this time and comment may be limited subject to reasonable rules of the chairperson, which I guess we could talk about what those are. But I was thinking it could also make reference to part of the next section where it says, no party, representative of a party, witness, or speaker shall be permitted to make personal attacks on another speaker, a member of the board, or any person whatsoever. And to me, that's kind of getting to what public comments would not be considered in order. Now, I don't know how you know what someone's about to say and tell them not to say it, so it gets a little complicated. But, based on one of the sessions we had in the past year, this did come up and was pretty uncomfortable, I think, for a number of us.
Oh, sure.
I'm going to recognize the town attorney.
Well, with regard to that, the open meeting law requires at a meeting that you allow public participation. So that's the being able to publicly comment on any issue. That's typically coming up under public participation. They can bring up anything. And then the limited subject to reasonable rules of the chairperson, that's where the chairperson can say, okay, I'm limiting that in time, or I'm not going to let you pick on a particular person, whatever it may be. That goes into a broad discretion of the chairperson, but you have to, in a meeting, allow the public to participate based on our open meeting law.
So it's really just up to the chair to decide, hey, what I'm hearing is out of order, is not permitted, and tell that person to stop talking.
Absolutely.
Elizabeth?
I agree with the way that it's presently worded, and I think that we can have faith in our chair to do the right thing.
Thank you for that, Faith. We'll try. Is there any other questions along this particular line? Richard?
I just want to clarify, we'll have these redone and then we won't sign this until we have a new copy?
Correct.
Yeah, we're not going to approve them tonight. Bob, is there any kind of like written guidance you could give the board? I mean, I read some stuff in this general vein this weekend. Is there any kind of documentation that could be provided to the board so we can understand reasonable limits? And if not, that's fine.
You probably want to, as the chairperson, review Robert's Rules of Order and the discretion that the chair has. But in general, and chairs are going to differ on the latitude that a chair gives a particular person speaking. And if it's a very narrow latitude, you're probably going to get some feedback or constructive criticism. And if you go too much, you'll get criticism for having meetings that go on all night. So every chairperson is going to have their own limits on that discretion. So it's pretty tough to indicate rules on that. But you see that difference between, like the difference between, let's say, your moderator at town meeting compared to prior moderators. You see just a different style. And there's nothing right or wrong so long as you abide by the open meeting law.
Yeah. Thank you, Bob. Question?
Yeah, and I'd point out that a ruling by the chair in that or any other situation can be appealed by a board member. Can say, I'd like to appeal that decision, and then the board gets to vote as to whether to sustain the chair's position or not. So it's not actually a dictatorship. It can be, the decision can be appealed.
Great, thank you. I would ask town staff if they have the time to review the Vermont League of Cities and Towns model rules of procedure, in particular the public participation section, and see whether there's anything in there that they would like to bring back to the board. I read it this weekend and found it to be kind of useful. I also think our rules cover a lot of that ground already. Is that something that you guys would be okay with?
Yeah, we can do that.
Thank you. So we are still in our rules of conduct. Are there any other points of discussion that folks would like to bring up?
Good for me.
Hearing none. John?
Two things. So, as I mentioned before, I thought our consent agenda rules were in this. We believe they may have been in a prior version. We have had a past practice on that. Would you like us to add in some language regarding the procedures around the consent agenda for your consideration?
Yeah, I'd like to see that.
Okay. And the other thing is, some boards will do a hard stop at a certain time for the meetings not to go on for too long. Do you want to consider anything, language for anything like that, or some sort of procedure whereby the board would have to vote after a certain time to extend the meeting?
I mean, if we're going to add language, I mean, I don't want us being 10 minutes away from finishing a meeting just to drag it into another meeting. So
yeah,
if we have to, which I don't think we do.
Have such specificity. I think it's a goal of Daniel's that I respect, but I don't think we should be so constrain ourselves.
I mean, yeah, I'm like I said, I mean, if we have to add it in, then I'm okay with the latter. If we don't add it in, I think the meeting just got a little bit easier. Yeah. Maybe longer, but easier.
So I don't need to raise my hand anymore. I guess. Earlier on, when the VTrans thing went about 30 minutes longer than we had slated it for, I didn't chime in to tell everybody to hurry up. I did keep an eye on the time and hope that we could move things forward. So I think the goal will be to have meetings that, move forward and take as much time as they need to take when there's important discussion to have. And we will try and write agendas that, measure how long each thing will take. Sometimes we'll make mistakes with that, or sometimes we won't anticipate that it will be such a big question. So I think we shouldn't put something in that rule.
As my mother-in-law used to say, it'll be what it'll be.
Yeah.
Right? So, okay.
But know that, I don't want to be trying to do this work after 9:30 at night.
Right.
Okay. John, any other items?
Nope, you got 45 minutes.
Okay, thanks. Yes. Well, I'm going to see if we can get done before 9. So we have got a number of modifications that we're going to make. You're going to come back with the document, and so we are not adopting these right now. So there was a motion on the floor for that words. What we'd like to do, just pull it back. Can we do that? Seems like we can.
We have.
Can we lay it on the table?
Yep.
Should we table it, Bob?
You could do a motion to table it and
Until
lay it
the
on
next
table
meeting.
until the next meeting.
Yeah, do we want to do that?
I'd like to make a motion that we table this discussion until the next meeting.
Okay. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none. Any discussion from the members of the public, because we haven't checked in with them for a while? Mr. Morland?
Given the meeting schedule in April, do you honestly mean the next meeting or possibly the third meeting in April?
I think, so
You want to be present?
behind the curtains, we have a meeting planned for the 16th, which will just be one agenda item, which is time sensitive, and then a meeting on the 23rd, which will be kind of our regular meeting,
And we
but
may,
on a special night.
we may possibly have one other time-sensitive issue, which
Very well.
Let's do it the 23rd.
Yeah, I think the 23rd would make more sense. And we will just travel under these current rules and behave ourselves as much as we can between now and then. Okay. So there was a motion from Dr. Reichsman to table the rules of conduct.
The motion to approve the rules of conduct until April 23rd.
Very good. Thank you for helping. So that motion is on the floor to table the whatever you said.
I wonder if there's any discussion.
Is there any discussion about that motion? Probably not. Okay, all those in favor say aye and raise their hand. That passes 5-0. Thank you. We are not quite done. I wish that we were, but we are not. So we have two more things to do. Review select board goals.
I don't even know.
So, John, what page of the agenda?
On page 110.
Okay. Is it really? Yes. So, Select Board, we made the following goals last summer. Making the transportation center a good place for parking, developing an expansive vision for the town pool, finding a path forward for community safety, developing the concept of safety zones, and advancing housing initiatives. We are simply just kind of recognizing that these goals are currently in place. I believe we're not going to make comments on them right now. We will have a goal-setting retreat, and if the board is willing, we will move on to talking about scheduling that just now.
Let's do it.
And I'm just going to check in with the public again, just in case, because I feel like we've been talking to ourselves for a while. Public in the room, any comments at this time? Okay. Public on Zoom? Okay. Sometimes we can get to be talking amongst ourselves and get forgetful, so... all right, John, scheduling the select board retreat. Would you like to talk about that?
Yeah. So one proposal that has come up on the retreat this year is instead of doing it all day on a Saturday, is to split it into 2 days to do an afternoon, like say a Friday afternoon, where all the department heads come and talk about the future with you and kind of what they're seeing and update you on progress we've made on the goals from last year. And then on the following Saturday morning, the board reconvene and have your own discussions about whether you want to continue with these goals or get more specific on them, or anything changes you might want to make, new goals, new priorities that might have come about. So that proposal's been suggested by the staff, and I wanted to just let you know that and see what you thought.
Consideration of that?
Stuff, I mean,
Richard?
just remembering my working days and Friday afternoon, they're okay with doing a kind of a heavy-duty meeting on a Friday afternoon?
Yeah, because it helps them not have all day
It helps them not come in on Saturday.
Oh, okay.
They're incentivized.
Yeah.
We threaten them with Saturday, and then they'll go for Friday.
And it wouldn't have to be Friday. It could be Thursday or Wednesday or whatever the board wanted to do. So.
Okay. Any discussion about that proposal lacking a date?
I think that the Friday is better because it'll be fresh in our minds for our Saturday. We get to ponder it, but also the information is fresh.
Okay.
Agreed.
All right. Sounds like we're okay with that. Do you have any dates in mind, John?
So that was, I think last year we were out towards the end of May or so.
It was June 3rd.
June, okay. Yeah. We were trying for May, and it was hard to get a date. We have two meetings already, additional meetings already scheduled in April on the 16th and the 23rd. Would you be interested in thinking about sometime in May? Is everyone going to be around?
I think so because, the 29th and the 30th are Jim Baker's days of April.
On April, yeah. Yep.
So May.
So maybe you have a meeting on a regular meeting on the 7th and a regular meeting on the 21st.
What about the 17th?
Yeah. What about the 17th?
What about it?
And 18th?
Sounds
I
good.
have an ironclad commitment in New York City on the 16th, and I could probably get back sometime on the 17th, but
Could you get back?
it's not a convenient day for me. Okay. And depending on what time we started.
I also might have something.
Okay.
And I can't remember what it
So
was.
The 24th,
But the following
25th.
weekend is Memorial Day weekend, and that might not work for people.
Yeah, I can't do that.
So 10th, 11th, 10th and 11th?
Yeah.
10th and 11th, I will be in Rochester, New York for my son's graduation from college.
Okay.
Very good.
How about the 3rd? That seems a bit soon. That's a heavy week.
I will not be here on the 3rd.
That's a heavy week.
Yeah.
So maybe we're into June.
Maybe we're into June.
What about May 31st and June 1st?
Yeah, that's...
Split this thing up over 2 months.
I can't do May 31st.
2-month-long meeting.
Okay.
Sorry.
So what I'm getting is we're not doing this year.
Sounds like May will be terrible.
So we're into June.
How is...
Well, if it has to be the 17th and 18th, I could make it happen.
And if it was, maybe if we started at 2 p.m., would you be back by then, Franz?
I could be back by then.
Okay.
Depending on the traffic leaving New York. But
Sounds great.
So
Thank you.
tentatively a session on the afternoon of Friday, May 17th, beginning at 2 p.m. with town staff, and then a session all day on Saturday?
As long as you want, but I was thinking more just probably the morning was about the same amount of time as you did last year.
I would appreciate that as I have to work.
Yeah.
Okay.
So can folks take a look at calendars and see if that date works for them as well, please?
Both of those days are clear for me as
Yeah.
far as,
So we're talking
previous
like
commitments.
9
9
to 1
to 1?
9 to 1.
on Saturday,
And
the
2
18th.
2 to 5, 2 to, I don't know how long that would be, 2 to 6 maybe on
Yeah.
17th.
Yeah. Board, seems like we have agreement on that. Okay, no vote needed. Members of the public wish to comment on our schedules?
Yeah. And any other guidance you have for that retreat?
Guidance for the retreat, John, Elizabeth.
Well, I liked what you said, John, about having the staff report to us on the progress of these goals, and there might even be just more information about the subject matter for us to work on. For example, more information about the safety zones, more, each item will really want fleshed out so that we can have a robust discussion about not just the goals, but where we're going on the goals.
Yeah.
Goals are nice, plans are better.
Good. So, Peter, did you want to say anything more?
That's
Okay,
all right
Franz?
there.
I'd suggest that maybe we submit some suggestions for examination in advance of what we think the goals for the coming year should be, so that the town staff could also maybe comment on some of those things, or at least so that there's a direction that the staff kind of knows where we think we might be going for the coming year.
Great. Yeah, I will. Sue Fillion kind of led us through a process last year.
Yep.
And I recall that we kind of did some polling in advance of that.
Yeah,
Could you check in with her about that?
But I want to weigh in on the fact that I like the goals we have, and I think they need to be pursued.
They're not done.
They're not done, and we might bring up some additional items, but I wouldn't want to abandon the needs of those goals.
I was just going to say the same exact thing. I don't feel like the goals we set, we acted on, which is why I would like to create timelines, goals for the goals to be completed and worked on, and stuff that's actually being rolled out that we can show some traction behind these items. I mean, it's really nice that we all sat in a room for a Saturday. We ate some good food and we had some great conversation, but I feel like it stopped when we left there.
Okay.
Well,
Elizabeth?
I think we have been pursuing them, but we need more.
Yeah.
And again, my goal about the goals is to stick with the ones we have
And set goals for them.
and
All right.
work on them.
Yeah.
Very good. So one at a time.
I
Franz?
would like to point out that we also have already set some additional goals, especially through the budget process, that we've set money aside to accomplish certain things, and I would like to incorporate that into the goal-setting meeting as well. I think we made some commitments, or at least had some discussions about places we want to go, and that we've allocated resources to that. So I would want to include that as well.
I would distinguish things that are happening and goals. There may well be, there are many projects underway in the town, and goals are, I think for these, maybe the word is not only goals, but it's priorities, right? These are select board priorities, particular areas of focus where the board as a policy setting body is saying we, want to be working in these areas. I think, I forget who said it, but I think coming back to those goals, those priorities, and seeing what progress has been made. I wonder if there could be some written material sent to us in advance, because I think having the stuff only be talked about means that you will not retain it all. And now I would slightly disagree with Peter. I think nothing would be... It's not that nothing has happened on these goals. Quite a lot has actually happened on those priorities. Not all of them, I will agree. And so if we could get written reports on what has happened in these priority areas, and maybe written thoughts about what may be forthcoming.
And we did do a written report to the board, I think in January or so, on progress on these goals. So we have made some good progress on them. They were... this is the first time we did this, and so, I think as we continue to move forward, we'll be able to get better at identifying these and working them into the budget, Franz. So, like turning your priority into a budget as well. So,
and I think that right now we should maybe just kind of move on to the next thing and come back to these discussions in that goal setting process.
Yeah.
Because I noticed the Smiths checking their watch, and we are 30 minutes behind our scheduled time.
We are?
And so, Select Board, is there any further discussion on Select Board housekeeping?
No.
No.
Okay, so hearing none, seeing no hands raised in the public, no hands raised on Zoom, I think we'll move to agenda item new business D, which was the Western Avenue at Guilford Street and Williams Street contract. And who would like to speak to this item? Looking to a member of town staff, I think.
I have a specific question about it.
Well, I think we should let
Yeah,
them present, given that we pulled it from the consent agenda. So if we could have a summary. And then
I think we have Sue
discussion.
Fillion on the line here.
Good. Hi, Sue.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Hi. Thank you. So I'm requesting authorization to sign a $60,000 contract with SLR to take a look at a stretch of Western Ave and two intersections. It'll be the intersection with William Street and the intersection with Guilford Street. Last summer, I came before the select board with concerns traffic safety had been grappling with the Williams and Western Street intersection for a long time, and really wanted to move forward with something on that, and the select board was supportive. At that time, I got an estimate from SLR, and we just didn't have the funding for it. And then through the ARPA surveying, looking at projects, the Guilford and Guilford and Western Ave intersection, became a priority. And so we wrapped those two in together, and SLR gave a revised estimate. I sought this through our procurement manual. We are authorized to do for professional services to work with, seek a contract from a firm that, we've had a relationship with. So we'll leave it at that and entertain questions.
Yes, the reason I wanted this to not be on the consent agenda was specifically that it didn't go out for bid. It was just awarded to a single applicant. And it seemed to me that we shouldn't do that on consent. If this is the right thing to do, and it looks like a great proposal to me, then I think we should hear from someone as to why it was good to do it in a non-competitive bidding process.
Elizabeth?
Thank you. As a member of as the select board member to the Traffic Safety Committee, I have urged the committee and worked with the committee to hire an expert traffic engineer for maybe 2 years now. And I think it's important for the town to have a relationship with a traffic engineer who knows the town. And so by repeatedly engaging the same traffic engineer, this engineer has a better understanding of Brattleboro and its traffic concerns and can better respond to the needs of the town. And I just really think it's important that we continue to hire a traffic engineer, because that is an area of expertise that our town staff is lacking, and we welcome that expertise because it's critical to safety and pedestrian safety, bicycle safety. And this spot in particular is tricky because the needs of cars and the needs of bicycles are not easily joined, and so we need an expert to kind of tease out the elements so that it's safe for all users, including pedestrians, at this intersection. And from what I understand, our decision-making at ARPA, we also wanted to include the William Street area because that's tricky, and that whole length of the roadway are connected. So if we have one engineer give a holistic view of the whole thing, the town would be well served.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Any further select board questions about this item?
And I just, if I could just weigh in, I've gotten an email from Bill Daly, who's the owner of the Vermont Country Deli, who understood that this was the SLR consulting agreement will be coming before the board tonight, and he just says he wants to continue to support the measures to make the area around the deli safer and looks forward to working with the town on this solution, and that we should let him know if there's anything further that he can do to support this.
Thanks, Peter. Further Select board questions?
Well,
Browns?
I don't know if Sue wants to answer this or John or somebody, but or the other board members want to address whether it's good to put a non-competitive contract on the consent agenda. I mean, that was really what I wanted an answer to, but we decided we couldn't do that on the consent agenda, which is why this is now off the consent agenda. But, you know, I mean, and Elizabeth's explanation is pretty good. I just thought that for the sake of the public as well as the board, that there should be some mention of the fact that we awarded this to SLR without soliciting bids from other companies, and that shouldn't just be on consent.
Great. Elizabeth?
I think that we should give the town staff and town manager the flexibility to understand when something does not need a full airing, and that we trust our town staff to be within their guidelines. And you know, I think it defeats the entire purpose of consent if we can't accept staff judgment on these matters to be on the consent agenda.
Okay. So we're veering a little away from this agenda item. Anything further folks want to say on that, Richard?
Well, yeah, more about the agenda item. I just want to clarify, I'm asking for clarification in the background description. It says the project will be completed by the end of the year. Is that the design part or is that the whole project?
That's a design part.
Yeah, that is the design part. And part of the reason it will take so long is, one of the items that has come up is whether or not a light is maybe appropriate for the Guilford Street and Western Ave intersection, to turn to go to Living Memorial Park and down Guilford Street. And they really want to make sure that they get good traffic count data for to study that question. And so they wanted to do it during kind of a peak foliage season. So it kind of pushes out the project to be a little bit longer to get some good traffic count data. Yeah, so this would be design work, kind of conceptual design work, and it would be completed by, they're estimating mid-December.
Members of the public with questions on this one? Okay. Seeing no hands on Zoom nor in the room. Board, would somebody like to make a motion?
I will.
Elizabeth?
I move to authorize staff to execute a contract with SLR Consulting for concept plans of intersection improvements at William Street and Western Avenue and Guilford Street and Western Avenue.
Okay. Any discussion on that motion? Okay. Seeing none. Elizabeth has made a motion to authorize staff to execute a contract with SLR Consulting for concept plans of intersection improvements at William Street and Western Avenue and Guilford Street and Western Avenue. All those in favor, raise their hand and say aye. Aye. That passes 5-0. And we have concluded our business apart from one more thing.
Motion?
Peter?
To adjourn.
Peter's made a motion to adjourn. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thanks so much. Thank you, BCTV, members of the public, whomever else. Interpreters, thank you so much.
So is this when I get all
Now,
this signed?
9:09 is not...
It's not 9:30 either.